folks, thanks for joining me for this episode of the Embellish Podcast, a podcast focused on product stories, product storytellers, interesting brand ambassadors, and anyone else that I happen to come up with. Whether you got here by chance or you're a bourbon fan, a geek, a casual observer, someone just that's floating through the channel, please feel free to leave a comment, subscribe, do all of those things. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. If you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll get that taken care of. I also generally live stream recording these episodes on Wednesday nights. Obviously, this isn't Wednesday night. You can find all of my links on Instagram at embellishpod or Twitter with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today is October the 28th, and we're going to be talking with Diane from Bourbon on the Banks. So I'll give you just a couple minutes or whatever, just kind of run through what Bourbon on the Banks is, and then we'll get into some questions.
Well, Bourbon on the Banks takes place in Frankfort, Kentucky, which is the capital of Kentucky. We are also the home of Buffalo Trace Distillery and several other distilleries within 20 minutes. We host an event called Bourbon on the Banks Festival. It's actually several events that take place over a Friday and Saturday. The main event, which is the festival, takes place on Saturday. This year we had over 55 distilleries there represented, some out of state, some in state, several liqueurs, a couple of breweries and wineries, but mostly it's about bourbon. And you basically pay for your ticket and you get to come in and sample and talk to the distillers. We have several bourbon societies represented, bourbon women. We have just a handful of select merchandisers that are there that sell bourbon related items, and we have lots of food trucks there so that you can kind of get a little something to eat between your samples if you need to, and it's a great time.
So you said you've got a Friday and Saturday event. Kind of what is the structure of this look like? Are Friday and Saturday sort of different from each other? Because I know, it seems like, or at least my experience is that September and October are the whiskey event months of the year. That's when everybody's doing something, whether it's you guys, St. Louis Whiskey Festival, Nashville Whiskey Festival, Whiskey Fest that the Whiskey Advocate does in Chicago. It's all in that same kind of window. But some of those other events, like the Friday, the Saturday, the Sunday, they're all basically the same event, just kind of stretched out. What is that the same case for Bourbon on the Banks, or are you guys slightly differentiated?
No, we are different.
Mm-hmm.
The main event only takes place on Saturday. As it stands, we are capped at 2,000 people. If we want to expand, we will expand in days and not in capacity. I think that that's one thing that's very unique to our event is it's a little more intimate,
Mm-hmm.
and you are not standing in line for an hour to get a sample. So, but yeah, right now it's the main event is on Saturday, but on Friday we have what is called a VIP reception and bourbon auction. That is what it sounds like, a VIP event. The ticket is more expensive. It has food, and a bourbon auction. This year we celebrated women in the bourbon industry. We had 10 very well-known women there that you could mingle with. We also had Freddie Johnson from Bourbon on the or Buffalo Trace Distillery, which is our own personal celebrity we just love, and so takes place from 5 to 8 on Friday, and then we also have a community event called Bourbon Street on Broadway, and that is for everyone. People who are coming for the festival, people coming out of the VIP. It's for the surrounding communities, and especially for our community. We usually get thousands of people who come to that. It's all free. We have it's it's kind of a circus theme. We've got aerial performances and circus. We've got fire acts. We've got street performers, live art demonstrations, magicians, human statues. It's crazy. It's they say Frankfurt gets freaky for one night, and we kind of like it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what that is. And like I said, it's free. We have the old Capitol, which is it's a celebrated kind of piece of history that we have right on Broadway there, and it has
Mhm.
a beautiful lawn, and we have a lot of free activities for kids on that lawn as well. So there's a DJ that plays lots of dance music. It's a good time.
Yeah.
And that's what Friday looks like. And we have a pub stroll that takes place down there too.
Yeah, I knew about that. I had several friends that were at the event this year and got a whole lot of snaps of the pub stroll and the experience from that. And so I will agree. I have not attended Bourbon on the Banks, but from an outsider's perspective, I can see a distinct difference between what you guys do and what other events are doing. Is because you have an open to the community event, you have a VIP experience, you have a tasting experience, and you have some events that are open to families. And so you kind of like run this full circle, whereas a lot of other events kind of become one note. It's the all 21. We're gonna cram as many people into a fenced in area as possible, and see how much whiskey we can shove in front of people. And there's not as much opportunity for kind of the conversations to exist. But you were describing the almost circus like atmosphere, and that was, I guess, what happened this year. Is that sort of the vibe that you go for every year, or do you change up themes, or is it kind of
It's
standard?
every year. We
Hmm.
every year I try to find new and exciting performers that are different. So it's not going to be the exact same thing every year. And even the performers that return, we try to get them to do a little something different. So yeah,
Cool. So yeah, and that's you kind of know what you're going to get, but you also get to try something new, right? Because you're going to have new performers, but it does, and this is a thing that's unique. I'm a native Kentuckian myself, and I've been to Frankfurt a handful of times for different things, school trips, whatever. Our capital is a little different than most states' capitals. It's not a large city. It doesn't have a ton of people floating in there, and it has a very um, homegrown vibe to it, at least in my perspective. I've been to a lot of state capitals, and that's the way it is. And it seems like this event fits that atmosphere. You think that's correct, or you think I'm off base there?
I mean, it's one of a kind.
Mhm.
When I was first introduced to Bourbon on the Banks, the very first year that we had it in 2019, it was my job to create that Friday night event.
Mhm.
And we have a concert series that takes place every other Friday throughout the summer. And we have bands that come in, and it's a big kind of street party, whatever. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to regurgitate this thing that we do all summer long. I wanted something completely different. So I think it is different for Frankfurt, but and I think when people come down, they're still surprised at how unique it is compared to everything else that we have to offer. But we are a pretty eclectic community,
Mhm.
and so we are pretty accepting of pretty much anything that comes our way. So I think that that's another reason that the community embraces it.
I think, yeah, you're exactly right. Eclectic is probably a much better term than what I was using. I'm in the far southern western portion of the state. We're almost Missouri down here, and Frankfurt is eclectic. That's a really really appropriate thing. So that's the kind of the atmosphere of the Friday event. What does the atmosphere of Saturday look like?
Oh boy, it's just lots of really good positive energy. I mean, we start setting up at 7 in the morning, and our volunteers are happy to be there. Our distilleries are excited about the day. They're happy to get going, and that energy is just like before we open up the gates for people to come in, you can just feel the vibration of just like, let's do this. And it doesn't stop until it's over. People, so this year I was down in the event experiencing it, but working my butt off, obviously, and trying to make sure everything's going well. And just, people are walking around with smiles on their face. And, you see them gather around a distillery as their master distiller is talking about what makes their product special, and encouraging them to sample it as a group, and talking about what to look for. And some of the distilleries will have actual tables behind their tent where you can sit down and have a personal one-on-one. And we've got a couple of like the bourbon societies might have a lounge where you can sit down and talk to them for a little bit. But I mean, people are just walking and visiting each distillery. But it's just a really cool positive vibe that just goes through the whole event, and it goes until we break down at night. It's I don't know, it's hard to explain until you experience it.
Right. And so you know that there's not many places that are going to offer an opportunity for you to have more than about a 25 or 30-second conversation with anybody at a booth, right? You know, you go to a whiskey event, you've got maybe 30 seconds to ask some questions, and then there's a line behind you. And it seems like you guys are mitigating that a little bit with capping attendance. So you can have that sort of personal touch, which is appropriate for whiskey, I think, or specifically bourbon, because there, I can't think of the number of times that I've had whiskey and ended up in a really really long conversation. That's just sort of what happens with bourbon, right? you,
Yes,
you start drinking, you start
absolutely.
having conversations, and then you look up and you're like, oh, I've been here for 5 hours and I was only going to stay for 30 minutes. That's
Yep.
just sort of what happens. And
Well,
it
and
feels that way.
everybody's got a story.
Hmm.
Every distillery has got a story. They all started from, a different beginning, and their journey's been different. And it's, you think you're going to hear the same thing over and over again, but you don't.
Hmm.
Every single one is unique. And, it's about that experience. It's not about drinking as much bourbon as you can, as fast as you can. Um,
Because you can only do that for so long, and that's the
right.
other part that people
That'll
show up at
end
these
your day
events.
pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, you're
But
going to buy your ticket. Maybe you're going to get what you're after, but you're going to limit your ability to enjoy the full length of the event at that point.
yeah, and we do have we try to stagger our entrance as well. So we have a
Hmm.
1 o'clock early access ticket, which those are the first people who get access to the event. We do have bottle sales, so it gives you first access to the available bottles. And then we have a second wave that comes in at 2 o'clock, and then we have a 4 o'clock wave. So it kind of, even though it's capped at 2,000, it staggers out that the
Hmm.
flow of traffic. So it never feels really crowded. It's definitely, you're surrounded by people, but you're all there kind of, you're not fighting like a dog over a dish.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's appropriate. And you said it, and it lasts until it ends. Like, what is end, right? So we got a one
Six
o'clock, 2 o'clock,
o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Yeah, 6 o'clock
Okay.
is the final call, and we got to shut them down so that we can get our distilleries out, preferably before dark. Doesn't
Yeah, and
happen, but the majority of it's done before dark.
yeah, they're at least able to not have to do everything by flashlight at that point, right? They're not trying
Right.
to
And we've
make
done
sure.
that in the past. It's just
Mhm.
not convenient. But yeah, we figure that 5 hour time, and I send out surveys to get feedback from people. Was it too long? Was it too short? And the vast majority, 95% say it was just right.
Yeah.
So
And I mean, I've been to other events that are set up for 12 hours, and realistically, I can only go through something like that for about 5 or 6 hours personally. Like that's the top end for me, because number one, like if I'm there just to taste whiskey, you're only going to get about 5 or 6 before your taste buds are blown out. If you're there to have conversations with people, like your social bank account gets really depleted because you spend 6 hours just talking to people, and sometimes it's just time. Then you need to go get something to eat, and you need to be able to drink water, and all of these other things that kind of come into play with it. 6 hours, I think, is a good time frame there. So when do you start? Like, do you have the event on the same weekend every year, like the second Tuesday of whatever, or do you like pick a weekend?
it's the first Saturday of
Hmm.
October. That's the first year we held it in August.
Hmm.
We got really fortunate with it being a cool weekend, but
Hmm.
that was that that was bad. To continue, we actually thought about that. Got a lot of pushback. So
Hmm.
the second year, it was actually the third weekend in October. But starting last year, we chose the first weekend in October, and we voted as a board to keep that consistent. That way, it's easier for people to remember, put it on their calendars.
Hmm. So if I were a person who plans ahead, like that kind of a human being, be a good opportunity to like go get a hotel room for that time if I was
Yes,
traveling in town right now.
that is an excellent suggestion. All of our hotels were at capacity that weekend. A lot of people did have to kind of commute, which is, that's another good reason to keep our numbers capped.
Yeah.
Because our infrastructure just can't handle much more than that either. Although we do have a lot of boutique hotels
Hmm.
and Airbnbs that will be coming on board, hopefully before the event. So that'll open up some more like downtown. But specifically the Plaza Hotel, which is across the street from the event, that's our only downtown actual hotel right now,
Hmm.
and that that was full by March of last year. So it's really good to book those early if you want to get that hotel.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's a really kind of a key thing that you guys are taking into consideration there, because there are other smaller towns that have whiskey events that have similar infrastructure problems, and they just say, "Oh no, we're going to shove more people in. We're going to, kind of maximize our dollars." And you run out of hotels, and you end up saying, "Oh, can I stay somewhere that's 45 minutes or an hour away?" Which doesn't lend itself to a whiskey event, being that
Right.
far from where you're trying to sleep.
We do have
Um,
a shuttle service that,
mhm.
or a transportation service. It's kind of like an Uber or Lyft, but that is not reliable in Frankfurt,
Yep.
unfortunately. So we have a business called Happy Trails, and she will do trips to your hotel if it's out by the interstate for flat fees. She'll take reservations, but she'll also drive you to Lexington, Lawrenceburg, Harrisburg, Shelbyville, and she has a whole fleet of people who do the driving that weekend
Nice.
to get people where they need to be safely and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, the last time we were in Frankfurt, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year ago, we stayed out on the interstate, just because it was easier for where we were traveling through or whatever. So there's a grouping out there, but that's really nice to hear that you guys have some degree of transportation opportunities to get people to and from the event. Because
Yep.
that can be problematic in other situations. So you're capping attendance at 2,000, and if you want to have more people, you'll have more days. How are you capping yourself on number of distilleries that are going to be available, or is that an area where you're always looking for growth?
So we have the ability to fit more in there. Where we hold the event is a park. It's along the river. It's a
Hmm.
linear park. Um, we can actually keep extending it quite a bit farther, so we haven't had to cap it yet.
Hmm.
Um, but and we have it slowly increased in size every year.
So if there's a distillery that wants to get involved, is this a thing where you guys sit down, you have a board, and do you identify distilleries, or do people reach out to you, or is it a mix of the two? Like, how do you get the distilleries?
So I have a master list. I begin by inviting back the distilleries who were there in previous years, and
Hmm.
then invite the distilleries that have not yet attended, and I have a lot of distilleries that will reach out to us as well.
Hmm.
And I have some board members who are on a committee, which we just call the Distillery Outreach Committee, and they tend to be people who travel a lot and go to events and stumble upon different distilleries, and they'll share information, and we'll reach out to them and invite them to come as well.
Hmm. And so there's I think you said there's a board of directors that are involved here, and then there's some subcommittees. Like, how does the board of directors get picked? Like, how does this group of people come together? Like, what did they do right in life to be a part of a whiskey event board?
Well, you know, the original board had a lot. I didn't have a lot to say in that board. I wasn't even
Hmm.
on the board. I just, helped with the event.
Hmm.
It was made up a lot differently than what we have now. When I came on board and became the director in 2020, I really wanted to see my most active participants in Bourbon on the Banks be part of my board.
Hmm.
Like my prize volunteers is what I like to call them. And that's kind of how it happened. When a spot became available, I would, the person who's getting a hold of my food trucks, I wanted her on my board. The gals that, or the guy who's my logistics person, who is completely priceless. His name is Eric Northcutt. I insisted that he be on the board this year, and so that's kind of how we choose it. We like to have a a lawyer on the board. It's always
Hmm.
handy to have that, no matter what kind of board you sit on.
Right.
And people with experience in the industry. Our Frankfurt Bourbon Society, a lot of our board members are part of that or on that board as well. So they're very heavily invested in the bourbon community. So we try to get a variety in there, people who have something to bring to the table.
And that seems to be, at least, I've been involved in, if I remember correctly, this is a nonprofit organization event type situation.
Yes.
I've
Yep.
been a part of boards of nonprofits, and it usually starts with my wife decides we're going to do a thing, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go do the thing. Now I'm volunteering at an event, and they're like, hey, you want to come be a part of this because we value you for XYZ reason. And those are always really rewarding opportunities, for you to kind of be a part of a thing in the community. But um, what makes this like? Why is this a nonprofit event as opposed to a for-profit event? Like, what's the goal here?
Well, we have a list of beneficiaries that we raise money for.
Mm-hmm.
So one of those is the White Oak Initiative, which is dedicated to the sustainability of the white oak, which is responsible for our bourbon barrels that we
Mm-hmm.
make bourbon out of. Obviously, that's a very important product that we need to have in order to make this. We're not blind to the fact that a lot of trees have to die for this distilled, item. So we give back to that. I think we are in really good company. Sazerac and Brown Forman, they're all contributors to the White Oak Initiative as well. We also give to what's called the Bluegrass Community Fund, which allows us to pinpoint specific areas in the Frankfort community that need some help. So we're setting money aside in that fund for the park where the event takes place, to improve signage, remove some of
Mm-hmm.
the invasive species so we can see the river better, do some improvements. Um, and then we also have some scholarship money that we set aside for any student in Franklin County that would like to go into a fermentation and distillation program at a accredited college.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Kentucky State University, they have a fermentation and distillation program there. So anyone from around the country that wants to go into our program at Kentucky State University, we have scholarships for them as well.
Nice. That's I like hearing that this is, like, this is a fun event, and most of the people that are attending likely are not attending because their money's going towards a good cause. They're attending because they like whiskey, they like events, they like music or whatever. But there's something that kind of gives you that little added, kind of kick up of like, oh well, there's also like some good causes behind this. How did you guys select what it was? Like, I understand the White Oak Initiative. I've talked about that particular one before, on other episodes, kind of around that. But like, they all seem pretty straightforward. But I can imagine, like, did it start off with the idea to raise money for all of these things, or did you slowly over time say, okay, we're going to add this one in, we're going to add this one in?
Well, originally, it was all of the money went just to Kentucky State University.
Hmm.
Of course, originally there wasn't as much money.
Hmm.
It's started off very small, and they just didn't make a whole lot of money. Of course, and when you're getting started, you really need to set aside more seed money to make sure
Right.
that you're sustainable in the long run. But once the amount of money that we were able to give grew, and also the demand, there are a lot of scholarships even now, I think, that are available for that same program. So they, quite frankly, did not need that much money.
Hmm.
We do offer the same amount, but now that we had more, we really just wanted to figure out where else we can put this money and putting it back into the community so that the people who live here and the people who visit here
Hmm.
are benefiting from the money that they brought here. Well, why not? If that makes
Right.
sense.
So you have, you sell out every year. You have 2,000 people coming. Are the bulk of these people tourists, or are they locals, or is there a blend of the two? Like, do you know what your segmentation looks like here?
So 55% of our attendees, both this year and last year, were from out of state,
Out
believe
of
it or
state.
not. Yes. And to me, I'm very proud of that. I mean, I think we are all really proud of that. It just really shows you how important these type of events are to Kentucky in general.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not competitive. When it comes to other festivals, we are all doing the same thing. We're trying to highlight Kentucky. We're trying to highlight bourbon
Hmm.
and share it with the world. And so, So it just goes to show that, Kentucky matters and people are willing to come here to experience it.
Absolutely. And but you're not just limited to Kentucky distilleries. I think there's some other events in the state that sort of do limit it down to like, oh, you're a Kentucky distillery. You guys have out of state distilleries that are participating as well. Is that correct?
That Yes, it is. We have several. I
Mhm.
think we had right around 20 this year.
Mhm.
Maybe not quite that many. Maybe closer to 15.
15. So if we're thinking 15 out of 55 is still, pushing at 13 or 14%, which is a good number. Like that's a really solid number for um, folks to come in. And I know some of the out of state distillers that were there. I've interviewed a few of them on episodes before, and they're the kind of people that like if I had not like I didn't come this year because my daughter had something going on that weekend. That's the way life goes. I have children, they have events, they do
Yep.
dance or gymnastics or whatever. But I knew Alan was going to be there from Spirits of French Lick, and he and I have talked a number of times, and I've had him on a couple episodes, and it's like, I want to go and just like hang out with him for a little bit, and I couldn't make it, and it was incredibly a sad, sad day for me. Um, how do you kind of measure the success of the event, right? You know you're going to sell it out. You're going to have a number of people, but I'd imagine that over time, like success looks different because sellout, if you do it every single year, is now just the standard. Like, what's the thing where you look back and you're like, all right, we know this year worked.
Well, first of all, we have not sold out the
Okay,
2,000 tickets. That's where we've capped our event. We sell out our early access tickets.
okay, sorry.
We sell out our VIP event. But every year we have grown by 300. So we are incrementally getting larger every year. Um, and as far as like the success, I have targets.
Hmm.
I try to make sure our expenses are covered by sponsors so that all the ticket sales can go towards the beneficiaries. Um, I send out surveys to the distilleries, to the community, to the attendees, to my volunteers. I try to get as much feedback as possible, and getting that feedback when it's overwhelmingly positive, that tells you it's
Hmm.
successful. When I'm searching desperately for ways to improve the event and I'm having a hard time finding things, there's always
Right.
room for improvement, and I will always search for improvement. But those are the things that just the fact that we are consistently growing at a nice, perfect little rate. It's all good.
Hmm. So you mentioned that if you ever, if you hit the 2000 cap and you wanted to bring more people in, you're going to kind of increase the number of days of the event. Um, have you thought about that? Like how do the logistics of that work now that you're going from like a single day distillery event to a double day distillery event, because you have the VIP event, which is part of it, but sort of a separate function. And then the Saturday thing is when everybody's there. Like, have you guys already started working a plan on that, or is this we're going to deal with what we have in front of us right now?
We have thought about it. I mean, we
Hmm.
would extend it to Sunday.
Hmm.
That just makes sense. I think we're probably good for at least one more year before we would have to really think hard on it. But it's definitely within the realm of possibilities for sure.
All right. So I assume this event hasn't been around for, um, you know, 10 years at this point. It's how many years old are you on the event?
We just had our third year,
Third
so
year.
I'm planning for the fourth.
So you were doing something else before this, right? And you ended up in working on this role. Like how did you get to running this particular event? Like were you a whiskey fan and this happened and you wanted to jump in, or like it's always interesting to see how people end up where they are.
I know, I know. Sorry. Hey, that would be the mailman who comes
I'm waiting on
every
UPS to
day.
do the same thing with my dog. UPS is about to do the same any minute, so I understand.
Yeah, anyway, I know. So, like I said, I was in charge of Bourbon Street on Broadway that very
Mhm.
first year. We had just moved to Frankfurt in 2017, um, and I was a stay-at-home mom. I mean, I went to school. I have a master's degree in vet science,
Mhm.
but stayed home with my kids. I homeschooled my kids. Had a lot of time big on like, giving back to the community. So
Hmm.
when when they were looking for somebody to organize this event, they volunteered me, and you know, I I was pretty good at it. I have a lot of experience with event planning, and I've organized uh, road bike events
Hmm.
before. The Polo Cross Nationals was here, and I organized that. Just little things along the way. I do have some experience with event organization,
Hmm.
but never in a million years managed or thought that this is what I would be doing. Anyway, when our main Wendy Kobler was the one who initially started this in 2019. She worked for Kentucky State University, um, and she accepted a position in upstate New York and left the day after the event, and kind of left a gaping hole there. They did kind of play around with hiring someone else, and when that didn't work, they asked me if I would do it.
Hmm.
And so I said I'd give it a go. Of course, the pandemic happened, but I had a lot of practice that year,
Hmm.
and then, you know, in 2021 was the first year I had it all myself, and it went really well. And they hired me back for 22, and then here I am doing 2023 again.
So you've already started working on putting stuff together for 23, I
Oh,
assume.
yeah, absolutely. Starting the week after the event, we have lots of follow-up meetings with each
Hmm.
committee, what went well, what are our lessons learned when it's all fresh in your brain. And we've already, planned on tweaks for next year. I've contacted several sponsors already. So we are actually hoping to get our tickets so on sale by Black Friday. So we want to open up those early access tickets as well. So once those are gone, those are gone. But
Hmm.
we'd like to have the tickets available so that people can give them as Christmas gifts.
And you said those sold out by March of last year. Was that right?
I can't remember when the early access tickets sold out. I don't think they went on sale until February.
Hmm.
So, I know when we initially, boy, now I can't even think of when it
But
doesn't matter,
you,
but
you may have 60 days to sort of sort out your ticket situation from whenever they start, is what we're getting at. Is, I wanted to
yeah.
impress anybody who listens to this who's interested in going, like, as soon as they're on sale, you better make a decision pretty quick because you may have a narrow window to get after it.
Right, especially for the early access tickets,
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah, and getting those hotel rooms earlier, highly suggested as well.
Right. Um, I am terrible. I'm not terrible, but I take a lot of notes and they get scribbled and they get all kind of disoriented in here. So I've lost my place on what I wanted to ask next. Is there anything that we haven't talked about for the event specifically that you would want to cover? Like we've got tickets potentially going on sale around Black Friday. Need to book hotels now. It's always going to be the first Saturday of October, at least in 2023. People could change their mind after that, but you've already solidified and are working on those dates. Are there any other like key points that we need to hit? But while I try to figure out what the hell I wrote.
Well, I really encourage people to come for more than just Saturday.
Hmm.
That's why we have the events on Friday. But we've got a lot of things going on top of that. We've got walking tours with E.H. Taylor.
Hmm.
He's phenomenal. He dresses up like E.H. Taylor, and he'll walk you around downtown and point out, specific areas of interest. We've got the Bourbon boat that has bourbon tours, on the river. You can actually go through the Lock 4 and visit Buffalo Trace on some of those tours, but he gives you the history of the river.
Hmm.
Um, the History Center has a couple of tours that they do. It's just, you know, there's so much history here, and there's so much bourbon history, and it's just you can come here and get a lot. Don't
Hmm.
just come for 2 days. Book it for 4 days and stay and enjoy it for a minute.
Yeah, and if you're not looking at opening up the gates until what early access is at 1 p.m. right, and so you've
Hmm.
got a morning to do some things, and you can pick up a any one of this or a distillery tour at Buffalo Trace, or
Yeah, yeah,
go
you'll want to
stand in line.
reserve that. You'll want
Yeah.
to reserve your tours at the distilleries now as well. When I first moved to Kentucky 23 years ago, that
Mhm.
wasn't an issue. You could just show up and go on a tour. But within the
Well,
last
23 years
few
ago, some of
years,
them were like, "You want a tour? What?" We had
right?
distilleries that way.
I moved here in '99. That's when
Hmm.
Buffalo Trace came to Frankfurt,
Yep.
and gosh, that was where we'd bring the families. But just within driving distance, you know, you can Buffalo Trace, Glen Creek, Castle and
Hmm.
Key, Woodford Reserve. It's just there's a ton of distilleries right here in Frankfurt. We've got Three Boys and Bourbon 30. Um, so there's a lot of things that you could definitely do if you were to come for a week.
So you said you do have bottle sales on site as well. Do you
Yes.
guys do any single barrel offerings that are for the event itself, or is it just whatever the distillers happen to show up with, or what you procure through a distributor?
So, as long as the distilleries, this is new this year, the House
Hmm.
Bill 500 made it
Yep.
possible for any distillery that has a Kentucky distillery license to sell bottles at festivals, farmers markets. So they were allowed to sell at the event. They can bring special bottles. Out of state cannot sell.
Hmm.
We had our local liquor store called Wine Cellar, who was carrying the out of state bottles, so you could go into their tent and purchase the bottles from Wine Cellar or Capital Cellar. Sorry about that. And we had a barrel pick that we had done through Wilderness Trace and our Wilderness Trail, my word, distillery, and we had that. It was a 4 grain bourbon that we
Hmm.
had selling at the event as well, and we intend to get another barrel pick this year. I'm not sure through who. We have our feelers out for a couple distilleries, but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet.
Yeah, I'm sure, and that's always great because usually the people for events like this, usually the people that end up on these picks, you get some pretty phenomenal volunteers that want to go out and they'll pick out some really amazing whiskey. You get a chance to buy something that's limited. You get some access to some people, your proximity to and one that I'll kind of touch on very very specifically. Castle and Key is one of the most beautiful grounds that you can kind of go to now as they're rebuilding what used to be there. But I'm stuck back on this walking tour with E.H. Taylor. Those are always fun, like like historical tours where you have someone who is kind of dedicated. I think of um, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I think about the Shaker Village that is south of Lexington, and I can't think of the name of Pleasant Hill. Like they have these people that kind of do these reenactments. It's always
Yes,
fantastic, and if you're there for whiskey and you get to do a walking tour with an E.H. Taylor, that sounds pretty fun.
it is. It is. You definitely dive into bourbon when you're here.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of Kentucky is that most parts of the state you can dive into to bourbon pretty deeply. I think that I've hit all the questions that I wanted to ask, and I think we've covered most of the things at this point. If you don't have anything else, we can cut it there. We don't have to keep it going too significantly long.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that you had us, and I hope you have us back so we can tell you about the new things going on this next year. We'll be able to tell you about the barrel pick, and we
Yep.
may be planning a couple brunches, maybe with distillers or things like
Mhm.
that as well. We just haven't, it's very early, so
Yeah, that was the other side of it. Is like I knew it was right after, but I always like talking to people right after the event because you kind of get the fresh experience of this year's event as you're kind of eyeing the next year, and then we'll revisit this conversation once you have kind of details lined out because now you get to measure like the things you're talking about now versus what you actually get to do, and sometimes you overshoot those, and you're like, oh, well, we wanted to do this, and we're doing these other 5 things now as well, and so those are always fun conversations to have. So I
yep.
truly, truly appreciate you for hopping on. Um, quick run back through first Saturday in October. It's in Frankfurt. Book a hotel now if you want somewhere to stay. Tickets will go on sale very soon. You're targeting Black Friday, but it could be give or take 5-10 days, whatever it happens to be. But you'll want to get those tickets early. Like these are the things that are there, and you go to what website do we go to get these things?
So the website is bourbononthebanks.org. I would encourage you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, which is just Bourbon on the Banks. And we will usually do a countdown to the release of the tickets, and keep everything current there as well. Right now, I believe our website still has everything from last year. Eventually, that'll get reset,
Yep.
and we will start, putting in our sponsors and distilleries that are coming for 2023.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Diane, for hopping on. I'm going to hit my outro here. Thanks for the time, and we'll talk again here in a few months whenever you get past the I can't talk about it part and you get to the I can talk about it parts.
Perfect. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for tuning in for this offering from the Embellish Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media at Twitter or Instagram using Embellish Pod. Give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, contact details, and more. I'll be back again next week with another new offering for you. So until then, cheers and thanks for hanging out.